Welcome back. Every parent knows how difficult navigating the teenage years can be. Lucky for us, we have parenting expert Dr. Ann-Louise Lockhart here today to break down some of our biggest questions. The question is where to begin when it comes to teenagers. Man, it is a party, isn't it?
It is.
Sometimes a party I wish I wasn't invited to every now and then. But I think a lot of parents struggle because they hit a certain age, your kids, and then it feels like sometimes they just do a 180 on you. Do you find that that's true?
Yes, what I find actually, because I see parents of kids of all ages, that it's rough during the toddler phase, and then it gets rough again at the teen phase. So I find that toddlers and teens are very similar for very similar reasons.
Okay, interesting.
Yes.
So I want to kind of dive into one of the biggest problems I think a lot of parents have with their teen, and that's communicating. How can we go about having some really good back and forth with them?
So a big problem that I see with a lot of parents and teens is they get that one-word answer and that grunt and the sass and the eye roll. And how I think we can help with that is to engage them in helpful conversations beyond just the one-word question, the closed question, and just saying, tell me more about your experience, tell me more about your day, or hey, I noticed that we tend to have this argument about this. Do you notice that too? I'd like for that to change. So I think engaging them as part of the process of finding a solution rather than hand pointing, finger pointing,
or
everything.
getting upset.
Right,
because
exactly.
this is normal.
Yes,
really
it is. It is. And teenagers, their brains are still developing. They may look grown, and they may think they are.
Oh, they do think they are.
They may think they are, but the problem is that when we're talking down to them and we're not engaging in respectful conversation, then they give it back. And so we want to also communicate with respect to our teens as well, too.
Okay, so we're talking, a little about what parents are struggling with. But we don't really take a lot of time to think about what they're struggling with, what they're going through. So typically, what is a teenager dealing with that would cause them to be maybe, a little frustrated or want to act out?
Yes, so I think the obvious thing that people always comment on is the hormones, right? And that's a part of it, yes. But I mean, they're going through a developmental phase of being their own individual. They're realizing that they have values and beliefs and thoughts about things that may be different from their parents. That causes a lot of struggle, and they're entitled to that. They're wanting to have their own opinions about things. So I think that's a big part, is that they have their own ideas and they don't feel like their parents are hearing them out. But peer pressure and peer acceptance is huge, especially in this age of social media, online use. And there's so much more pressure than we ever had.
It's a different world for them.
It is a different world.
I almost feel bad for my teens. Like I've said this before, I feel like my teenage years were so much easier because you could unplug. It wasn't in your face 24/7.
Right, exactly. And so, people say, well, bullying has always been a thing. Right, but then you can go home and detach, and now there's cyberbullying, and there's so much more pressure. And so I think we have to keep in mind that our kids have so much more pressure than we ever had.
They're going through so much. They really are. We got to go easy on them.
Yes.
So really quickly, if you could just talk to maybe the parents out there that feel like they've kind of lost touch with their teens. Maybe they feel, they've thrown their hands in the air. They're like, I can't relate. I don't know what to do. What can they do today to reconnect?
So I just talked about this with a school in New York yesterday, and I saw a great suggestion on Instagram about just being present with them, going out, going to a donut shop and just being present and hanging out and not even expecting them to speak, just being present with them, going for a walk, getting ice cream, playing a game, watching a movie, just being present with them rather than having the expectation of them always sharing what's going on in their life.
And knowing that it's normal if they don't want to share.
Yes.
You're not doing anything wrong. This is just the way it is sometimes.
Yes, right. And they're not, we can't expect that they're going to communicate to us the way that we would communicate to other people.
Yeah.
That we need to give them the ability to just be who they are.
And what do you think the difference is between female teens versus male teens? Who's easier? Who's more difficult
to
live with?
I don't know. I hear such mixed things about that. Some people say, well, I think people are harder on girls sometimes.
Yeah.
People have more allowances for boys, but I don't know if there's kind of an objective evaluation of that.
True. Everyone's different.
Everyone's different.
Sometimes it's the girl, sometimes it's the boy that makes you want to pull your hair up, but you love them so much and they're so fun.
Yes.
I love the teenage years.
I do too.
It really is a wonderful time. You're amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you for being with us today. You can also follow Dr. Lockhart on Instagram. She's also on TikTok. She's got over 80,000 followers, and she's always dishing out some amazing advice. What is your handle?
Dr.Ann-Louise.Lockhart on Instagram. Same
Okay.
thing on TikTok.
Perfect.
Yes.
And for everything that she just spoke about, you can go to our website, watchdaytime.com. But Dr. Lockhart is not going anywhere. We have had you send in your burning teenage questions. So she is going to answer those, cover all of it, help you get back on track with your moody mini adult a little bit later. Happy Friday, and we are back with our parenting expert, Dr. Ann-Louise Lockhart. We had asked all of you to send us your questions, and you did not disappoint. We're covering teenagers, living with teenagers, and we've got a lot of parents out there struggling a little bit.
I can imagine.
So you're going to help them today.
Yes, I will help them today.
Okay, let's get started. First question from Kathleen. She says, my 15-year-old daughter recently found a picture of me at a party in high school. Now, every time I tell her that she can't do something, she refers to it. What should I do?
The good switcheroo.
Oh, yeah, they're so smart.
But, we have to remember as parents, we're not perfect, and nor were we all perfect teens.
Yep.
So sometimes when our teens see pictures of us or, some memoir of us, I think it shows that we're human and that we didn't all get it right. So I think it's okay to acknowledge that, like, yeah, you're right. I did do lots of stuff when I was your age. Yeah. But let's talk about that. Let's talk about what works, what doesn't work, how we can build trust, how I can earn trust.
Right.
And I think that we just need to have a frank, open conversation with them so that they can make responsible decisions.
They appreciate that.
Yes.
I have realized with teenagers, when you'll just be honest with them and talk to them like, another mini adult, sort of, still being the parent.
Yes.
They appreciate that.
They do.
They like the respect. Grace from El Paso says, I have 2 teenagers that are close in age but constantly fighting. How do I get them to stop seeing each other as rivals? See, I can relate to this. I've got a 13 and 14-year-old. They're 1 year and 9 days apart, and it's constant.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you do?
This is very common, and I think people need to remember that we all have dynamics that go on in all relationships. And the family and sibling relationships is like a prereq to real relationships, right?
Yep.
So, but when you're with somebody all the time in various situations, you can just be yourself. So I think if you notice a constant source of tension and arguing with your teenagers or your kids, asking them like, hey, I noticed that when you come home from school that this happens, or I notice on the weekends when we're at home all the time this happens. What's up with that?
Yeah.
And really finding out like what's driving that behavior. I always find that when there's a problem that's going on, especially when it's chronic, there's something that they need that they're not getting. Maybe they need individual time. Maybe they need time away from one another. Maybe they need their own space.
Maybe they need time with just mom.
Yes.
A little one-on-one time.
Exactly. So my husband and I will divide and conquer with our preteens.
Great idea.
You take this one, I'll take this one, I'll see you in a couple hours.
We'll draw straws to see who gets who.
Right, exactly. And so especially, when everybody was like on lockdown, like that got much worse. Yeah. So it's really about giving them their space and finding out what's driving the conflict and then helping them find solutions to that problem.
Makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Stephanie from Austin asks, ever since my kids have become teenagers, I feel like I'm living with 2 complete strangers. How do I get them to feel comfortable letting me in again? We mentioned that earlier.
Yes, we did.
It's like they don't want anything to do with you, and parents are on the outside looking in saying, but I love you.
Yeah.
Let me in.
But see, I think we have to remember that's where understanding childhood and adolescent development is important, which how would parents know this? That when they go from child to teen, one of the developmental stages is what we call individuation, being your own individual separate from your caregivers. So they sometimes separate to become their own individual, and that looks like moodiness, irritability, withdrawn, isolation, and it's normal in a sense, but what we want to do is understand that, empathize with that, and acknowledge that,
Right.
and then give them that space, but know that that's a normal part of the development.
Don't get frustrated.
Right. Try not to.
Try
not to.
Being the key word there. Okay, next question is from Connor. Connor is from Corpus Christi, and he asks, my wife and I recently found out that our daughter has a boyfriend. She's 14. We've always had a rule that you have to be 16 to date. If we say that they can't date, will she just go behind our back again? Ooh, that's tough.
That is a tough one. So if you make a rule just real hard and kind of strict, then yes, they're more likely to break it.
Of course.
So I think then you have to ask yourself, when, as parents, we will have rules. Why is that a rule? Why is 16 a rule? And does your teenager know that? Do they understand why that's a rule? Or is that because that was a rule for you and you just like made it up for your own kids? So
you when you took that
right,
picture.
Exactly. So I think we have to then talk to them about maybe why that's a rule in our house, why that's a guideline, why we think that we want them to follow that or not, and what their thoughts are about it. Again, when they're teenagers, they're going to be leaving your house in a few years, and we want them to be their own individual, to make independent, smart decisions, and they can't do that if everything is always being dictated to them.
That makes perfect sense. And being a little flexible helps out.
Flexibility helps.
A lot. And finally, our last question is from Nathan. Nathan says, I want my son to try harder in school, but I also don't want to hurt our relationship if I put a lot of pressure on him. How should I go about this?
All right, so one of the topics I enjoy talking about is executive functioning.
Okay.
And executive functioning is something that happens in our brain, in our front part of our brain, that continues to grow until mid-20s. And part of executive functioning is time management, motivation, starting and finishing a task, making good decisions. All of that doesn't finish developing in a brain until your mid-20s.
That's a problem.
It's a problem.
They're in college before that.
Exactly. So how can we expect a 10, 12, 15, 18, 21-year-old to make good decisions and be motivated for something that's not fun when their brain isn't fully primed and ready to do it yet? So I always go back to what is driving a behavior or lack thereof, and find out, why is my kid not motivated for homework? I mean, why not? It's not
so
fun.
fun.
Right? And finding ways to kind of interject things that are fun for that kid. How can we integrate other things that are part of their personality, or chunking things? Like, okay, you don't have to do all of it now. Let's spend 15 minutes and then set a timer, or let's work on 30 math problems and take a break. But really finding out, like, what is it about it that's hard, and what is it about it that prevents you from doing the thing?
That makes perfect sense. And that's kind of depressing that
It is.
The development isn't full until 25. It explains a lot of bad decisions.
Yes, it
does.
does.
Really does.
Right.
It really does.
So we're expecting things from them that they can't really physiologically, biologically, neurologically do yet.
Yes, absolutely. Dr. Lockhart, you are just wonderful.
Thank you.
I learned so much just having you here today, and I'm sure our viewers did as well. Thank you for spending some time with us. And again, you can follow her on social media, on TikTok, and your handle is?
Dr.Ann-Louise.Lockhart.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank
Go
you,
follow
too.
her today.